Ears in the start. Before we begin, take a slow breath. Look up at the sky. It looks calm. It looks quiet. It looks safe. But space is not empty. It is cold. It is silent. And it never forgives mistakes. On a clear winter morning in 1986, millions of people looked up at the same sky. They were excited. They were proud. Many were children, sitting in classrooms. They were watching a space shuttle named Challenger. At first, everything looked normal. So why do people still talk about that day? What went wrong? And what did the world learn from it? This is a true story. Every part of it really happened. And it is a story we must remember. The Space Shuttle Challenger was a spacecraft built by NASA. NASA is the space agency of the United States. Challenger was not a rocket you throw away. It was made to fly again and again. It launched like a rocket. It landed like an airplane. NASA had 5 space shuttles. Challenger was the second one built. It first flew in 1983. By 1986, Challenger had already gone to space 9 times. It carried astronauts. It carried science tools. It helped build knowledge about space. The Space Shuttle program was about learning. It was about science. And it was about showing people that space could be explored again and again. Challenger was part of that dream. On January 28, 1986, 7 people were on Challenger. They were called astronauts. They trained for years. They knew the risks. They trusted their team. Let's meet them. Francis Dick Scobie was the commander. He was the pilot in charge. He had flown in space before. Michael Smith was the pilot. This was his first space mission. Ronald McNair was a scientist. He studied physics. He loved music and learning. Ellison Onizuka was an engineer. He was also the first Asian American astronaut. Judith Resnick was an engineer. She helped operate the shuttle systems. Gregory Jarvis was a satellite expert. This was his first space flight. And then there was Christa McAuliffe. She was not a scientist. She was not a pilot. She was a teacher. Christa McAuliffe was a school teacher from New Hampshire. NASA created a program called Teacher in Space. The idea was simple. Send a real teacher to space. Let students learn from space. More than 11,000 teachers applied. Christa was chosen. She trained with astronauts. She learned how the shuttle worked. She prepared lessons to teach from orbit. Children across the country were excited. Teachers brought TVs into classrooms. Students felt like space was closer than ever. This mission was about learning. It was about inspiration. It was about showing kids that space belongs to everyone. That is why so many people were watching. The launch was planned for January 28, 1986. It was early morning at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. That night, something unusual happened. It became very cold. Colder than any space shuttle launch before. Ice formed on the launch pad. The temperature dropped below freezing. Cold matters in spaceflight. Not everything works the same in cold weather. Some parts become hard. Some parts do not seal properly. Engineers had concerns. They had seen problems before. Not disasters. But warnings. One of those concerns involved a small rubber ring. The space shuttle used solid rocket boosters. They were large rockets attached to the sides. Inside those boosters were O-rings. O-rings are rubber seals. They stop hot gases from leaking out. Rubber works best when it is warm. In cold weather, rubber becomes stiff. It does not seal as well. Engineers from a company called Morton Thiokol knew this. They had data from past flights. They had seen O-rings damaged before. The damage had never caused a disaster. But the risk was real. On the night before launch, engineers warned NASA. They said the cold temperature could be dangerous. This is a fact. It is recorded. It is proven. NASA and contractor managers held a long discussion. They talked by phone. They reviewed charts and data. The engineers recommended delaying the launch. Managers asked questions. They wanted proof that it would fail. Not just that it might fail. No one could say exactly what would happen. Space is complex. Some things cannot be tested fully on Earth. In the end, the decision was made to launch. There is no evidence of evil intent. No one wanted harm. Everyone believed they were making the right choice. But the risk remained. And the countdown continued. At 11:38 a.m. Eastern Time, Challenger lifted off. The engines roared. The shuttle rose into the sky. White smoke filled the air. Teachers watched with students. Families watched with pride. NASA engineers watched with focus. For the first moments, everything looked normal. 73 seconds after launch, something went wrong. A flame escaped from the right booster. This flame damaged the fuel tank. The shuttle broke apart high in the air. There was no explosion like a bomb. It was a structural breakup. This detail matters. It tells us the truth. The crew cabin remained mostly intact, but it was falling. There was no way to save the crew. This is a question many people ask. The honest answer is, we do not fully know. There is no proof that the crew knew what was happening. There is no proof that they felt fear. The breakup happened very fast. There was no warning alarm. No escape system. The shuttle was not designed for this kind of failure. NASA later stated that the crew likely had little or no time to react. We must be careful. We must not imagine pain or fear. We must stay with facts. The sky filled with smoke trails. The launch controllers went quiet. Families waited for news. Teachers turned off classroom TVs. Children were confused. NASA stopped all shuttle flights immediately. Search teams went into the ocean. Debris was recovered over many weeks. The nation mourned. Names were remembered. Faces were shown. Stories were shared. The mission was over. But the questions were just beginning. President Ronald Reagan created a special investigation. It was called the Rogers Commission. Scientists, engineers, astronauts, all studied what happened. The cause was found. The cold temperature made the O-ring stiff. It failed to seal properly. Hot gas escaped. This led to the breakup. But the investigation found more. There were communication problems. Engineers' concerns were not fully understood. Risk had become normal. This is called normalization of deviance. It means small problems were accepted over time. That lesson mattered. NASA made major changes. Rocket boosters were redesigned. O-rings were improved. Safety rules became stricter. Engineers were given more power to stop launches. Concerns had to be addressed, not ignored. The shuttle program paused for nearly 3 years. When flights resumed, safety came first. Challenger changed how space missions were planned. Not just in the US. But around the world. The Challenger crew is honored today. Schools are named after them. Scholarships were created. Learning centers were built. Christa McAuliffe's message continues. Teachers still inspire. Students still dream. The astronauts were brave. They believed in learning. They trusted science. They deserve respect. They deserve truth. They deserve remembrance. The Challenger disaster was not about failure. It was about responsibility. It taught us that listening matters. That warnings matter. That safety is not optional. Science works best when people are honest. When questions are welcomed. When concerns are heard. Space is still dangerous. But we are wiser now. And if there is one thing to remember, especially for children, it is this: real courage is not ignoring risks. Real courage is facing them together. And that is a lesson worth carrying, all the way to the stars.